Man, this is so sick. Hey, you know what would make this better? There you go. Hell yeah. Now I don't even have to play it.
How goes the new video game you purchased at full price? Worth it?
Oh yeah, it's probably like the best thing that's ever been made. I especially like the graphics during all these parts in the dark place. It feels so weird to play a brand new, honest to goodness video game. I'm so used to just like broken garbage. I feel so far from home.
Didn't you play Starfield?
No, I never played Starfield.
You did.
What are you f***ing with me? I would remember that. It's a Bethesda game and probably would have eaten up like a month of my life. I'm excited for it to come out though.
Deceit detected. Suggestion. Consult your Steam account.
Look, I appreciate this renewed interest in pranking me, but you have to present a believable premise. You think you know my gaming history better than me? What the f***?
Find anything interesting?
I don't understand. No. That's not right. I wouldn't do that. That's not me. I'm not me.
Let's go.
The Blair Witch Volume 1, Rustin Parr, is a third-person survival horror game, backdoor nocturne interquel, and
You ain't heading into them woods after dark, are you? Terrible dangerous at night. Best run on home to the city.
simulator. It was developed by Terminal Reality and published by Gathering of Developers and Take-Two in the year 2000 for PC only, though a Dreamcast version was discussed and deemed too difficult to optimize for. Rustin Parr is the first of 3 games developed by different studios aligned with Gathering of Developers, and released as budget titles months apart from each other, and all 3 utilize Terminal Reality's Nocturne engine. That is to say, the engine they developed for their previous game, Nocturne, a Prohibition-era alt-history survival horror game following the episodic hunts of a secret government organization codenamed Spookhouse, and more specifically, a monster-despising, dual-wielding badass named simply Stranger. Beneath that game's rough edges, you'll find a thoughtfully created world full of fun lore and characters, operating not unlike the X-Files with a film noir reskin, with all the ghoulish creatures and sexual tension that implies. It's a tougher sell than it used to be, but was noticeably atmospheric and visually interesting for the time, and the time is right now. As is the case with most genius media, it was not adequately respected in its own time. Critics despised its outdated control scheme and occasionally awkward fixed camera angles that had you discharging firearms at off-camera horrors. But hey man, mystery is an important part of horror. Our minds can fill in the blanks and dream up horrors that no author could put to paper. Well, actually, I'd say it was for the most part reviewed positively. It just didn't sell as well as the publisher would have liked, meaning its disc may as well be, as Computer Gaming World likened it to, a coaster. Unfortunately, the computer gaming worlds of the world seem to have had their way, and though Terminal Reality spent years hinting and wryly alluding to it, a sequel never came. And with this promising potential series left irrevocably on the most worst-case scenario of cliffhangers, neither did I. What had remained abundantly clear in each of the painful years that ticked by without a Nocturne 2 was that they obviously wanted to do it, but weren't confident that this would be a wise allocation of resources for the longevity of their studio. Mid-2000 was an ominous time for Terminal Reality and their publisher, Gathering of Developers, a collective of game studios that rebelliously banded together to form their own publishing wing after understandably feeling as though most publishers were out of touch and exploited game developers. While I certainly feel like this undertaking was well-intentioned and resulted in some inventive and strange little games, it's clear that they were near constantly waylaid by financial difficulties and overambition. A year earlier, this lack of funds led to the group selling a 20% stake in the company to their distributing partner, Take-Two. A rough, but necessary acquiescence to the adversary that bought them time to create games like Nocturne, Railroad Tycoon 2, and Age of Wonders, but also one that God CEO Mike Wilson made no secret of despising, depicting himself as a Christ-like figure who sacrificed his values in order to keep his team's heads above water, when really he was kind of their Gorbachev and Nocturne was their Pizza Hut. None of these games sold particularly well, and it seems like most people knew the group more for their controversial E3 antics than for their actual games. A year later, that payout had dried up and things were looking bleak, leading to them contradicting the collective's entire premise and allowing Take-Two, the man, Big Gaming, to buy out the other 80% of God. Unsurprisingly, my old enemy, Computer Gaming World, took great pleasure in God's quickly developing tailspin, penning some coverage in their October 2001 issue titled God's Fall from Grace, which aside from reaffirming that Nocturne was still a coaster, pulled a quote from Cliff Bleszinski, who would go on to become CEO of Epic Games for a time. But in 2001, he was probably mostly known for holding a contest that required people to photo scan their terrified cats. The thought and the plan behind the board was genuinely honest, but in practice, God was disorganized and the developer board was a joke, citing the reality that along with Kiss Psycho Circus, the Blair Witch series circumvented the normal approval procedures because Mike Wilson was so excited about getting the IP, they essentially threw out standard procedure on a dude trust me basis. Wait, holy shit, I just noticed in editing this right now that Jeff Keighley wrote this.
Hey guys.
All this time I had been directing my disdain at CGW, when all along it was just Jeff during his hater arc. The Blair Witch trilogy's first installment is in and of itself perhaps the most damning evidence of Terminal Reality trying to make Nocturne a thing, without having to shutter their doors. A few months out from the release of Rustin Parr, in IGN, or probably GameSpy writer. Video game publications have the same Matryoshka doll timeline as most game studios. They ask Terminal Reality's PR person, will there be a sequel to Nocturne? The answer they give implies that one is already there, on paper, it's ready to go. Building this coffee table seems like a real daunting task that might take all day, and really, who would judge me if I just set my coffee on the box? I mean, it's sturdy enough. Oh, fuck! Being able to turn around and spend 2 years making a product is getting harder and harder. There's no real promise that you'll make your money back, so we're looking at it carefully. The team definitely wants to do a proper sequel to Nocturne, and that character-based stuff, but we'll have to see. The solution to this was Rustin Parr. Despite being a tie-in to an immediate pop culture landmark of a motion picture, Spookhouse, Stranger, and the rest of the Nocturne gang all make an appearance. Obviously, the decision to make a series of games about the Blair Witch was a transparent attempt to provide a quick turnaround of cash, and for Terminal Reality, specifically, a way to sneak their toys back onto shelves under a more recognizable branding, feeding off the success of a film that burned so bright it was rapidly lapsing into parody. And yet, I can't deny how serendipitously this worked out. On release, Rustin Parr was met with a wildly mixed reaction. GameSpy would give it a 92 out of 100, writing, with a strong storyline, fantastic graphics, interesting presentation, wonderful voice acting, and engrossing gameplay, Blair Witch is another in a long line of excellent TRI releases. Here's hoping that Human Head and Ritual can keep up the high standards of this release with the next 2 games in the Blair Witch series. On the other end of the spectrum, the game was given 1 out of 5 stars by fucking guess. CGW's hate boner for God remained consistent as they maligned, serious gamers will be put off by the lack of interaction and poor controls, while movie fans, who are casual gamers, will have a tough time with high system requirements. There doesn't seem to be much of a built-in audience for this one. That may be a good thing given its dubious quality. In the years since, the trilogy dwells in the same homeless void that Nocturne pattern occupies. A whole franchise without a legit means to play it, and to add insult to injury, Poland's fabricator of tepid spooks, Bloober Team, released a higher profile Blair Witch game in 2019 that dominates most search results, leading to less gamers even accidentally stumbling upon them. In order to better examine why this game exists and why it is the way it is, it may be helpful to refresh your memory on the film that captivated a nation, reinvigorated the genre of found footage horror, and purportedly had moviegoers fainting and vomiting. Not because the film was frightening, but because they looked at those concession prices. Am I right? $6 for a single soft drink? That's highway robbery. Oh, it's a freestyle machine? That changes things. I got ideas. I'm gonna make me a little concoction. The Blair Witch Project, as a piece of media, is a brilliant trick that can likely never be played again, and even now, you may be able to appreciate a rewatch, but sans Time Machine, that first hit can't be replicated. If I could distill it into a blurb, it follows 3 college students as they attempt to film a documentary about a local urban legend concerning a witch that influenced a historic serial killer. Only this event happened a few years before the film's release. The film crew went missing, and somehow these tapes were dug up from the foundation of a century-old abandoned house. That's how I would describe it to a digital native, someone who doesn't know a world without the ubiquity of the internet. If you asked me in '99, I'd probably use many of the same words, but would also use words like real, not fake, and compelling evidence of the paranormal. I don't know if I knew that phrase at like 10 years old. I don't think I had the capacity for speech yet. I was still just handing people drawings of stick figures shooting each other. More so than the movie itself, I vividly remember the moment I saw the TV spot for its theatrical release. I remember the wave of unease I felt. I was getting ready for bed with my plush Scooby-Doo. I mean, my nothing. I held on to nothing. I was alone. Only my wits about. And before turning off the old CRT, I was just left with the black and white grainy shot of Heather Donahue running for her life and screaming her lungs out. Its marketing was actually hugely important to its efficacy. Hell, even Scooby-Doo himself got in on it. So he's cool, and it would be cool if I had a plush of him. But I didn't. And I still don't.
Shaggy, what are you doing in the corner?
I'm scared, man!
The film's 3 central characters are kind of annoying, but in a believable, recognizable, understandable way, and they aren't very good at making a movie. In an endearing way, it feels realistically unprofessional. Even when they are within the movie, filming for the documentary, within the movie, they leave in flubs and mistakes and bicker about the condition and proper use of their rented equipment. They find a figure that is important to the lore of the Blair Witch, one that actually shows up in this video game as a matter of fact, and they talk over her interview and cut her off mid-sentence. They find these cursed totems that are sort of like grave markers and accidentally kick one over. The first third of the movie shows them behaving sort of friendly, in that way that you would with a friend you met in class, or rather, the way I observed others being friendly with one another.
I think it's Heather taking a piss.
But the more wandering in circles they do and haunted noises they hear in the dark, the more you see that camaraderie start to erode. One of them gets the group lost, and in an act of petty retaliation, another just kicks their map into the river. Annoyance and discomfort gives way to mistrust and anger. Then when one of them goes missing in the night, desperation and terror that culminates to what may be one of the most disquieting final sequences of a film. In the 70s and 80s, there was an initial wave of this sort of thing, with wince-inducing gore flicks like Cannibal Holocaust and Guinea Pig, the former being similarly about a missing film crew, and both managed to convince a handful of people that they were legitimate snuff films. But it's not as though the genre lay dormant until Blair Witch. What makes it special isn't that it simply remembered a film technique. Most of its novelty came with everything peripheral to it. There was a confluence of media and storytelling that is in some ways more interesting to me than the movie itself. The Blair Witch Project is the cherry on top of a creative work that was harder to manifest than a film about a bunch of college students screaming and chain-smoking in the woods. It was effective even without the extreme violence that the genre typically indulged in.
Oh my god. Fucking hell. How you frightening. What do you think? Fucking hell.
It's creepy while showing you nothing. With no budget to show you anything, its atmosphere and realism is working overtime. The most concerning thing you see in it is a tooth, and even that had to be borrowed from a dentist. I don't know if they had to give it back or maybe they added it to a necklace or something. Probably gave it back, right? That would be the normal thing. Directors Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, under the name Haxan Films, were influenced by the rise of paranormal reality content, documentaries about UFO abductions, shows like In Search Of and Unsolved Mysteries, and sought to, in a very literal sense, make one of those. But not just a film about a fictional paranormal entity, they had to create the fictional mythology that would then warrant a fictional urban legend to proliferate, and then lead to a fictional film to be made about it, and then make a movie about the fictional characters using their real names, creating it? You feel me? I don't know how much newer generations get that part, the part where they took painstaking measures to ensure that a lot of people legitimately thought that what took place in the Blair Witch Project was reality. This meant expertly utilizing new methods of marketing, taking advantage of the internet by creating websites,
BlairWitch.com.
posting to forums, getting different dummy documentaries to play on more than one TV station, lying to film distributors, pretending their cast was actually dead, and squeezing realistic performances out of them by intentionally disorienting, scaring, and starving them. Method filmmaking, they called it, but it's more like non-union improv torture acting.
They let us sleep the first night.
Yeah.
And then, starting on the second night, there was certainly a building of how much they were going to torture us.
Admittedly, there was a backlash to this. I can remember knowing more than one person that felt bitterness once it became irrefutable that we'd been had, that this was a work of fiction, and the faces of these three kids that once adorned missing flyers are now appearing on The Tonight Show. If the hard cut to written and directed by wasn't enough of a giveaway that you were watching a film.
There's a little bit inside of me that says, I want to believe that there's something else out there.
We want to try and find that building that supposedly they found that camera in.
But to me, that makes certain parts of the Blair Witch Project more impressive. I couldn't recall ever seeing such naturalistic, organic acting. It was like a magic trick that left me scratching my head. I was locked in that moment in prank shows where they point out the cameras, but I didn't entirely get it yet. Wait, so you lied to me? You can do that? I mean, of course, even at that age, part of me was like, wait, so you're giving this footage of people dying a wide theatrical release? That seems somewhat in poor taste. But I was also young enough to think, hey, maybe in the post-internet age, I don't know what the term for that is, in a world where websites are a dying concept, you're not going to be fooling anyone for too long. Further attempts at this were a little silly.
I am actress Mila Jovovich, and I will be portraying Dr. Abigail Tyler in The Fourth Kind. Every dramatized scene in this movie is supported by either archived audio, video,
doubt, ire directed at either the film's gimmick or its oversaturated cultural relevance, led to its cast receiving bizarre criticism such as, I really would have preferred it if you were actually dead in that film, though worded more harshly. Heather Donahue, who played Heather Donahue, whose wet-faced selfie monologue has been imitated and parodied to hell and back, received a Razzie for her performance, even though half the people watching it thought it was literally the lucid deathbed apology of a real human being beset by a real witch. The supplemental Blair Witch stuff were also directed by Myrick and Sanchez, and are equally as impressive to me, not recognized nearly as much as they should be, and displays the two directors' clear understanding of and affection for goofy paranormal shit. Also, I can only imagine it increased the amount of sympathy cards that the cast's family members received. It's so one-to-one with what this type of show looked like and shows remarkable restraint in making it funny. I mean, I can see the inherent humor in replicating this style because I already appreciate it. But there's like one or two lines where I thought, okay, you snuck one in there.
Even some of them blame me for being maybe part of the whole.
I don't believe in ghosts and vampires and communists.
All deep woods are alone.
But for the rest of the time, they are indistinguishable from something that would have played on the History Channel. Of course, there was a truckload of other material that came later that is less coupled with the first film and made by other creators. Novels, comics, and even a YA series. But it's all coming from the same well that Blair Witch Volume 1 Rustin Parr draws its plot from. By their own admission, Terminal Reality's game has little to do with the film, and everything to do with a paycheck. I mean, it's mythos. Ultimately, I find the thinking behind this move to be sort of brilliant, and I can't tell if they lucked out or if they knew the lore of the Blair Witch well enough that they saw how easily it could intersect with their own. The original Blair Witch website is still accessible, and most of the material that was used for the video game's plot can be found in it, and all the other embellishments were made with the approval of the Haxon team, and occasionally pull from the plans for sequel films that never made it off the ground. Thankfully, a major event in this fictional timeline coincides with the period that Terminal Reality Spookhouse was operating, and obviously it would take some incredible foresight if the website made mention of Spookhouse operatives. But it's built in that those characters are supposed to be ghosts. The public isn't supposed to know about them, so why would they show up in witness testimony and police reports? Of course, there is a part in the game where the protagonist is outed as a Fed by the local authorities in front of the whole town and Agent Cooper, but Volume 1 of the Blair Witch trilogy takes place in 1941 and takes an ancillary character from Nocturne, an irascible scientist-turned-field agent named Dr. Elspeth Holliday, and makes her the protagonist of this story. In the opening training sequence, our predecessors, Stranger and Svetlana, make an appearance, and they essentially clarify why it wouldn't make much sense for them to investigate the Blair Witch. Even though Spookhouse hunts the full Halloween menagerie, Stranger is more of a hard science guy. He goes after things he can see, touch, and more importantly, empty a mag into. Everything surrounding this case is nebulous, backwater tall tale, campfire stories emanating from skull-stained teeth. You get the impression that this isn't the first time the tale of a witch out in Burkittsville, Maryland wound up in their crank file. Only now, it's escalated. A local hermit named Rustin Parr has walked into town and admitted to abducting 8 children and ritualistically murdering all but one, who was instructed to stand facing the corner as he went about this grisly task. He claims he was compelled or ordered to commit these heinous crimes by an old woman ghost that spoke to him from the forest. Colonel Hapscom assigns Holiday and Stranger to confirm these claims, but Stranger shrugs it off and offers to remain on standby until Holiday can confirm there is something worth shooting there. You know, even though this game occasionally maintains this slavish adherence to the Blair Witch lore, Terminal Reality really makes a meal out of having Spookhouse back on screen, and this being an interquel of sorts. It continues to operate as though this is not the last time we'll be visiting this world, making ominous allusions to the cliffhanger ending of Nocturne. That game takes place over a series of episodes that are spaced years apart, with the last one taking place a year after this game is set, in 1942, and it leaves the fate of several of Spookhouse's agents uncertain after someone or something bypassed their complex security secretary. In Nocturne, we see Stranger on more than one occasion entering Spookhouse by speaking their code phrase, a dorky esoteric security measure that he is consistently embarrassed about having to participate in.
The password, Stranger.
By this point, I could have killed you and flipped the switch to open the door myself.
You wouldn't do that, would you?
In Rustin Parr, we see that again, only this time Stranger comments on the fact that they haven't changed the secret phrase since Roosevelt founded Spookhouse in 1902. He feels this makes them predictable, and vulnerable to an attack from an enemy force. Holiday dismisses his words as paranoia, but then he says,
Whoever it is, they won't have a hard time getting in here. And you won't be so confident when you're dead within a year.
I feel like that's not a card you pull unless you feel like you had time. There's some real House-Annie energy emanating from this scene. Some, don't worry, we'll get like, what, 2 more of these, right? Kind of energy. Connection to Nocturne aside, Rustin Parr isn't paced quite like that game. It's more chatty and narrative driven. There's more NPCs and incidental characters to gab with and gather clues from. Holiday keeps a journal, so there's more reading and researching involved. After most significant conversations, you're just sort of handed a dossier with a bunch of lore to mull over if you wish. There's dream sequences and it plays around with time. It's surprisingly more focused than Nocturne, until you enter the forest actually, but then again, it has most of the foundation of its story predetermined and it's like a fourth of the length. It's essentially Nocturne DLC, the Nocturne X Blair Witch collab. Still wish I could just hang out with the cool guys from Spookhouse.
You are forgetting something? Well, I suppose I'll be hitting the old dusty trail. Unless you'd like to, hang out. Perhaps join me in a few rounds of Fusion Frenzy for the Microsoft Xbox.
No.
I'm also in possession of some marijuana cigarettes, if that's the vibe.
Really? No.
Very well. I shot my shot.
Holiday shows up in Burkittsville, and despite being given a cover story about a missing niece from one town over, immediately sticks out and rouses the suspicion of the local motel owner. He's baffled that she's traveling alone, unescorted by a husband. While this annoys her, she records in her notes that it will be easy to manipulate the locals using a helpless woman routine. I'm glad they put in some work to develop Elspeth's personality, because I remember playing this for the first time and being worried that picking her to be the protagonist was a thoughtless decision. In Nocturne, all you really know about her is that she takes her job very seriously, and she really doesn't like it when Stranger takes her shit without asking.
Damn it, Stranger, how many times do I have to tell you to keep your hands off my instruments? What the fuck?
That seemed like the whole joke of her character, that she was a mad scientist that had an interdimensional hell beast splayed open on a slab, but the most pressing concern was that Stranger put her trepanning crank in jello. They even call back to this as she's gathering all her tools before leaving.
Damn it, Stranger! You've been going through my things again! How many times do I have to tell you hands off?
In any case, this was the last moment of that being all I knew about her. The motel owner suggests Holiday talk to the sheriff, but his office seems to be closed for the day, so she explores the town and catches up on the local gossip. At the diner, we meet Gretchen, its owner, and Special Agent Dale Cooper.
This must be where pies go when they die.
And Peter Durant, head of the Burkittsville Historical Society. Holiday plays dumb about the supernatural and lets this guy explain why he's a firm Blair Witch believer. He's about to tell her some horrific occurrence concerning a young girl named Robin Weaver, when suddenly he becomes nervous and offers to tell the story when he's not liable to piss himself. She could also just go talk to this woman herself, as she's still alive and in town. But she's regarded as something of the town eccentric, somewhere between a crystal mommy and a cat lady. Either way, you know, crystals are involved. Gretchen gives you a couple more names to check out, like Horace, the newspaper editor, and Kyle Brody, the sole survivor of the kids taken by Rustin Parr. Though he hasn't spoken a word since he returned. Where are we zooming? What are you doing? I think the game also feels more story-heavy because of how often Holiday speaks, even to herself. After most cutscenes, she spends a moment getting the facts straight on what she learned and what the next best step would be. This is another improvement from Nocturne, but I couldn't imagine Stranger having this much to say. I'm pretty sure if we were playing as him, that whole cutscene would have been him solemnly slurping soup.
You ain't from around here, are you, mister?
No.
Before calling it a day, she mentions to the motel owner that she's going to be headed to Rustin Parr's home in the morning, and he clumsily tries to dissuade her, asking that she at least stay away from Tappy East Creek because that's where she lives. When Holiday confirms he means the Blair Witch, he responds with fear, telling her to never say her name out loud because she knows. It's about here that I noticed this game really making more of a transparent effort than Terminal Reality's previous game to mirror horror films. The moodiness, the camera angles, they build up to a jump scare and get you if you're susceptible to such things. It really does display some kind of growth from Nocturne. Some may read this as growth in a maturing or creative sense, but I suppose you could also read it in a tumorous sense. A metastasizing of cinematic spookiness. This sequence where Holiday tries to get some sleep but shoots out of bed after a door slams is pretty effective. Some kind of scary ghost shoots out of the bathroom.
I don't have time for a bath right now.
Okay, I mean, long day of traveling and whatnot, but no rush, I suppose. Let's get around to it soon, though, yeah? So, Holiday arms herself with all her weapons and gizmos and runs after it, picking up its spectral trail at the sheriff's office.
Excuse me, are you...
Oh! What's that? I just came from watching the Blair Witch Project. It didn't have one of those. He looks scary. If you'd like to experience the rest of this game's plot on your own, feel free to skip to this time where I will summarize my feelings on the game's plot. So go ahead and skip to this time. Oh, did you catch that? Well, you gotta be quick. You're stuck now.
Even your neighbors could be harboring a communist, so be sure to snoop on them at every available opportunity. If you really have to piss, just think about the Statue of Liberty.
Don't worry, guys. I took care of things during the break. Turns out you can just shoot these guys. Sorry to disappoint, but Damites are a Terminal Reality invention and have nothing to do with the Blair Witch. And this is the first, though not the last, time that one of their properties would feature them. Exploring Burkittsville further, we are attacked by seemingly the whole town. Peter Durant, Gretchen, Special Agent Dale Cooper from the hit television series Twin Peaks as well, now turned into a creepy demon zombie. Honestly, I got nothing but respect for this. You could read the reuse of monsters they already made for other games as lazy or unimaginative, but I like to think of it as sticking to their guns. They wanted these gross little freaks in a game, and they didn't care how ill-fitting they'd be. Even with the ability to levitate off the ground and withstand several bullets and loss of limbs, Elspeth makes short work of this town's entire population. The butcher, the baker, hell, even the candlestick maker, guns them all down, even the dead-eyed children. I think it's right about here that she begins to have mixed feelings about what she's done, and a flash of lightning reveals their bodies to be human once again. Not seeing a way to explain this to the boys at Spookhouse, and likely hoping to avoid some kind of community service or mandatory psych eval, she decides to eat a big sandwich. Stranger arrives a little too late to, I guess, prevent her from doing that. It doesn't sound like something he'd do if I'm being honest. If I'm being honest, I'm almost certain he's been in this exact same pickle at some point in his tenure at Spookhouse. Subverting what may have been a shocking and bold opening, Holiday wakes up from an apparent nightmare. I do like that in the dream, there's a stained glass window in the church that explodes, and when you go to the church later, it's still exploded, and Holiday's like, what happened here? And the priest is like, yeah, I don't know. And they never really give a clear answer for it. That's the kind of shit I like, and that they don't really do after that. And I mean, if you're gonna invoke whole characters from Twin Peaks,
damn good coffee. And hot.
You gotta walk the walk and do that at least once, you know? Give me some doubt. Give me one or two things left unexplained, please. 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 I don't really like any of those takes, so I'll use all of them.
I don't have time for a bath right now.
I mean, okay, Elspeth. Like, I'm not your fucking mom, but it seems a little bit unbecoming of a federal agent. But that's fine. Day 2 contains a lot of talking to all the characters in town at length and gathering data in hopes of building a case for this being Spookhouse's type of thing. Holiday finally meets Sheriff Bowers, and of course he is cartoonishly unhelpful and would much prefer she just head on over to Martinsburg, where her hypothetical niece came from. The nervous younger deputy Hobart buys her story story and repeats that they can't help her using nicer words, dissuading her from visiting Parr's house, as the locals were so upset that they formed a proper torch-wielding mob and burned it to the ground, along with any evidence that may have helped us better understand why this happened. Once the sheriff is out of the office, Hobart offers more information. He's been finding weird little stick figures made out of twigs in the cell that they kept Parr in. In order to milk this dude of all the information he's got pent up in his brain, Holiday makes a bold play and pulls rank, outing herself as a federal agent, and it works. He hands over the only map they have of the surrounding forest. We can also chat with the local school teacher Suzanne, who is a wreck considering half her class is dead. Also, her husband, the pastor at the church, refuses to acquiesce to her pleas to just leave town and put this nightmare behind them. She sheds some light on the mental state of Kyle Brody.
He doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, he doesn't talk.
Okay, well, he's eating something, right? Like, he'd be dead by now. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm sure this kid's fucked up. If you follow through on your promise to visit Durant at the Historical Society, he shares a book about local folklore. I really enjoy Elspeth's inner monologue that she appears to be speaking out loud. It's full of subtle little details that illustrate her character rather effectively. Even though she refers to Durant as the only person in Burkittsville that hasn't annoyed her, she still pokes at his beliefs to better understand how genuine he is.
Is this everything that's been written concerning the Blair Witch?
Believe any of it now?
Interesting, but hardly conclusive.
In this book, which he reads an excerpt from, it essentially explains what the established lore behind the Blair Witch herself is. Back when Burkittsville went by its original name, Blair, in the late 1700s, a woman named Ellie Kedward was accused by several children of stealing their blood. A town mob marched over to her house, took one look at all the crystals, tarot cards, dark-sided stuff, gargoyles, and collectively looked at each other and nodded before booting her out of town. She was also an Irish immigrant, so that probably factored into it, as this was that weird era of time where racists were more granular with their intolerance. Over the next years, every child that accused Ellie of witchcraft wound up dead, leaving the townsfolk to panic and leave Blair abandoned. A new guy showed up 55 years later and established Burkittsville, and other than one incident where a disembodied hand dragged the 10-year-old into a river, there didn't seem to be no sign of any curses or green-skinned witches afoot. The next part is actually clearly described in the film and is the subject of this game's sequel, the story of Coffin Rock. In 1886, a girl named Robin Weaver went missing, and 2 search teams were sent into the forest to look for her. It's claimed that she eventually just wandered back home, and both teams were called back, but only one returned. A group of hunters found the bodies of the second search party at Coffin Rock, a big old rock shaped like a tapered hexagon. The search party had been killed ritualistically, all bound hand to foot with their entrails removed. After the hunters returned to town to get help, they found their way back to Coffin Rock, only to find that all the bodies were gone. It's interesting how much work they gave themselves in writing this story, or rather how many opportunities for continuity errors and contradictory plot lines they created for themselves. They have their own characters from another franchise reading this info dump of Blair Witch lore that is clearly straight from Haxon, and then Durant explains his first-person account of the Robin Weaver incident and mentions a soldier with a head wound named Lazarus that he met, referring to the protagonist of Blair Witch Volume 2 Coffin Rock, that was actively being developed by Human Head Studios. So they are being a Nocturne interquel while being a Blair Witch sequel in a trilogy that is chronologically backwards, so technically a prequel to this fucking shit. There are so many plot pitfalls here that the other entries do find themselves at the bottom of on a few occasions. But you know, I respect the confidence. I really do. Terminal Reality was setting him up for an alley-oop, and then a second sports metaphor happened. Horace is the town's newspaper editor, and he's still gloating about his coverage of the Rustin Parr story, but has already apparently moved on to an even bigger scoop that he's keeping a tight lid on. The latest edition explains that even the judge who presided over Parr's trial was irrationally pissed, sentencing him to be Good for him. Kyle Brody's mother refuses to let you talk to her son. The trauma is too fresh, and she's in pieces watching her son stare vacantly into the horizon, holding on to his T-posing teddy. This is the first indication of something I find really interesting about this game, and the trilogy in general. It starts laying out plot elements that were meant to be in future films in the Blair Witch franchise. The same month this game was released, the sequel to The Blair Witch Project was released in theaters. If there is one thing seared into the memory of millennial film heads other than the final shot of The Blair Witch Project, it's watching that movie's creators enact the ultimate bag fumble with Book of Shadows Blair Witch 2, a film that dropped the main gimmick film technique of its predecessor, started showing the horrific things that were once only discussed, and asked a lot of the average moviegoer to be cool with. This is the normie's opinion, of course, not mine. For my money, the film is so unrepentantly goth-coded that I am compelled to abstain from casting judgment.
Goth. A way of life.
Also, to be fair, it's only partially the fault of the Haxon boys as they preemptively distance themselves from any possible sequels, having the foresight that Artisan would attempt to quickly capitalize on the success of their film, with or without them. Though I don't know how worthy of a pat on the back it is to toss a pinless grenade into another director's hand.
And if we really don't have any good ideas, or if they're not going to let us do the idea that we want to do for some reason or the other, we'd rather let them have a shot at it and see if they can do something good with it. And if not, we can just say, hey, we didn't do it.
Suzanne shows Holiday one of Kyle Brody's drawings, which includes the familiar Twigman symbol, something Elspeth is convinced belongs to some kind of demonic alphabet. At the ruins of Rustin Parr's home, it seems the deputy wasn't foolin'. The place is leveled and of no use to our investigation. So Holiday instead decides to check out Coffin Rock, where there is again nothing tangible that proves the existence of the Blair Witch. Elspeth feels as though the place has witnessed evil, that it feels naturally oppressive, but on paper it's just a big old rock. So she kind of relents that Spookhouse doesn't operate off of vibes and bad dreams, and plans to call them and report that there's nothing paranormal at play here. On the way back, she gets proper lost, passing by the same tree over and over. That is until an owl shows up and appears to want to guide her to a little cabin. Clearly an act of magic, because I don't know if you know this, but owls are very, very dumb. Like, they're fucking morons. Inside is a Native American man going by the name Asgaya.
I followed a white owl here.
Dear Asja, the white owl is a symbol of great wisdom.
After Elspeth tells him her name, he uses that to see right through her cover story, and even reveals that she doesn't have a sister, but does have two brothers. Impressed, she admits that she's looking for the Blair Witch, and they have an interesting conversation about it that introduces a pretty substantial twist to the entire mythos of the Blair Witch. He's lived in this forest for years and never seen this witch, but he knows the forest houses a more ancient, primeval demonic force that predates Ellie Kedward and even the colonization of the Americas. It's actually quite Twin Peaksian, solving the crime and revealing your antagonist early on only to realize that the true villain is a cosmic embodiment of man's own capacity for darkness. In Twin Peaks, it was heralded by the invention of the atomic bomb. In Blair Witch, it could very well be the genocide of this continent's indigenous population. Or it could just be that there's like a little devil man with horns and a pitchfork. Both are valid possibilities. Before parting ways, he gives Holiday a Twigman necklace that he refers to as Givner. Now I know you're thinking, Givner? I barely know her. This thing will allow her to see the true path out of the forest. On the way back, she also notices a strange wooden archway leading to Parr's house that wasn't there before. In a moment of self-aware writing, once night falls, you'll start getting attacked by a variety of monsters and ghouls in the forest. But fittingly, even Elspeth doesn't see how they have any connection to the Blair Witch. Those are just some other shit that aren't as concerning as a possible demon. I mean, I guess it makes sense, like, in the opening training sequence we fight vampires, and I guess vampires don't stop existing while we're looking into something else. It makes sense. There are other things, possibly. Probably the most on-brand enemy are these big twig men that walk around and whack you with their twig limbs. And I'm not sure if this idea is the result of too little thought or too much thought. I mean, on one hand, when you're asked to invent enemies for a game based on a property that had no minions, no little guys, evil goons, I can see how you'd look around at what you got and land on the one recognizable piece of iconography and say, well, what if that was bigger and it gets you? But on the other hand, they thought to add the detail that in order to finish it off, you have to kick over the pile of stones that houses its weird glowing heart. And I'm wondering if that is some kind of reference to the moment in the Blair Witch Project where they accidentally kick over a weird pile of stones, which kicked the paranormal activity into high gear.
You didn't just knock that over. Please tell me you didn't just knock that over.
Is this Terminal Reality's explanation for the creepy twig snapping noises the film crew heard? It was quite literally twig men? That's actually kind of eerie in concept. In practice, it's not, because I can see it and realize, oh yeah, never mind, that was a bad idea. This is stupid. Scrap this.
These trees are blocking my way. So no head?
I don't know why I don't lie to you more often than I already do. It's fun. I like it. Before heading out for our third day investigating, Deputy Hobart stops by and gives Elspeth a copy of the Rustin Parr case paperwork, including a number of crime scene sketches that were not made public, which show the strange markings carved into the victims pre-death. He also hands over one of the Tawana, the twig figures that keep showing up in Parr's cell. I'm a bit chronologically confused here because Hobart says that he continues to find twig men in the cell Parr was kept in, and he doesn't know how he keeps getting the twigs to make them. But isn't he dead right now? Like, he already got hanged by now, right? The newspaper said that an angry mob essentially lynched him because they didn't want him sitting on death row for months. But Hobart's the only character speaking about him in present tense. I'm sure it makes sense. I'm sure it does. This is a classic me mistake to make. Otherwise, I don't know what's what.
I don't have time for a bath right now.
Okay, Elspeth, look, you're an adult. I think you know when you need to bathe yourself, and you know whether or not you act on that, and the advice of those close to you is your call to make. We ask Durant if he has any literature about Native American folklore, and he gives us a book that adds some more context to the fate of Ellie Kedward. It turns out she wasn't just told to leave, she was intentionally tied to a tree in the midst of a brutal winter with the expressed intent of it killing her. But she didn't die, presumably using properly charged crystals of some fashion, and ironically the entire town of Blair died off in the winter meant to take Ellie's life. If you stop by the newspaper one more time, Horace says he's about to finish up the scoop of his life, but he's still not saying anything about it until it's on the rack. Outside the school, you find a young girl talking to herself, or rather, having what sounds like a two-way conversation with someone named Emily, who isn't there. This is Mary Brown, a character that was introduced in the Blair Witch Project, the local wacko that claims to have had a brush with the Blair Witch as a child. The crew half-assedly films an interview and then pokes fun at her later.
You learned a lot, man.
Yeah. You learned a lot about Mary Brown?
In the 1940s, she meets Elspeth and tells her that Mr. Brownie is missing, and doesn't elaborate on what that's in reference to. After she runs off, Elspeth remembers that one of Rustin Parr's victims was named Emily. On the way back to the forest, we're stopped by the sheriff, who confronts Holiday about her cover story. He spoke to the sheriff in Martinsburg, and he's never heard of her or a missing girl.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate your concern. Blast. The local sheriff knows my cover story is bogus.
Okay, well, wait till he gets a little further away to say that to yourself.
I knew it!
Apparently, in the time it takes you to cross the road separating your hotel room to the school, Horace's story has come to light. The judge that sentenced Rustin Parr was murdered, his body found in the general store. Its owner, Daniel Cole, has been arrested by Bowers. Okay, wait, if he's there now, then who am I?
I've got the front desk now. He was never here.
Unable to approach the crime scene and not convinced it's relevant to the witch, Holiday heads back into the forest to speak with Asgaia. Asgaia wiggles his hands over the Twigman and activates its magic potential, which should allow her to walk the path she could only see before. After hanging the Tawana along the strange archway, Holiday unknowingly walks through a portal of some kind. The forest on the other side of this threshold painted in fall colors, and strangely, the destroyed home of Rustin Parr is standing again, looking much as it did during the Blair Witch Project. This sequence is the most intertwined with the film that this game gets. In the basement, Holiday essentially walks in on the final moments of the film. She sees Mike standing in the corner of the room, then Heather enters, still rolling on her camera, until an unseen force pushes her down. An alternate angle shows that Mike was looking down talking to Kyle Brody. The two kids disappear, leaving just Kyle, who runs off after being spotted. I think the path here was to firmly illustrate that in the Blair Witch Project, when Mike and Heather arrive at Rustin Parr's home, they have crossed over to somewhere else in time. They stumbled out of the 90s through this gateway, and it's the same door that Holiday intentionally walked through. This kinda has to be the explanation why the film crew's 90s era camera equipment was found underneath a 100-year-old house. I think that it's a pretty clever and considerate way of nodding to the source material while still having fun with your own IP. It's easy to get bogged down in the myriad things about this game that are outdated, lazy, or clunky, or just plain wrong.
Colonel, your message sounded urgent.
Where is the stranger?
Cut! What's the rumpus? What the hell is this shot? I can't even see this broad's mug.
It ain't my fault she's by-sitting.
Just fix the shot, Lou. I already got the studio head thinking I'm a schnook after spending a whole heap of clams on that giant stick bug scene.
I'm ready to go. Why is she sitting like that?
But I see them putting in the work to create something interesting with what was, in most cases, thoughtless. They even modeled the CP16 camera that Heather would have been holding at that moment, because Mike ran downstairs with the high 8 and it's on screen for all of 3 seconds. Like, you didn't have to do that, but you did, and that's nice of you. There's plenty of evidence to collect in Parr's house, including several scattered pages of his diary, which document his descent into madness as the being from the woods begins to exert its control over him. On a wall, we find a blood-spattered mural depicting a boy being sacrificed at Coffin Rock, as well as what Holiday determines to be some kind of dimensional map, denoting where the forest opens to other times and places, each with a Tawana associated with it. She seemingly plucks one at random and hopes it's the one that takes her back to 1941. Before then, she stops by Coffin Rock and finds Kyle's teddy bear, which has been cut open like the depictions of sacrifice associated with the place. After getting thoroughly stick-bugged, we are stopped by a mysterious hunter. The man reveals himself to be Jonathan Pry, a witch hunter from the year 1786. For a moment, Holiday is able to hold a conversation with her predecessor. She has to break the embarrassing news that, well, it seems like you don't end up killing the witch. There was a gap of 50 years after his tango with her, but whatever he did, it doesn't take. He promises that once he's gone on one last hunt, he'll compile everything he's learned about the Blair Witch in his journal and leave it hidden at Coffin Rock, and hope that, no punk kids find it, or like over a century of the elements. Back in our own time zone, Asgaia's owl shows up to fetch you, and the two discuss all she's experienced. While Burkittsville is still tormented by some evil force, Asgaia asserts that Price very well may have killed a witch, maybe even what you could describe as a Blair Witch. But the evil within the forest is greater than one cackling green-skinned cauldron stirrer. Perhaps sensing she's ready, he goes on to name this evil. Rustin Parr and now Kyle Brody are puppets of a being named Hekaitomix. Probably not its real name, but that's what he calls it. He's also the last person alive that knows how to exorcise Hekaitomix from a host's body, handing over another Tawana imbued with this power. He doesn't believe anyone has the power to confront and defeat Hekaitomix 1v1, but some people have worked out how to navigate the network of portals inside the forest, and he thinks their best bet is to simply trick it into being shot to another dimension.
Another dimension?
Yeah, another dimension.
Another dimension?
Another. Price's journal was indeed left in a cave by Coffin Rock. Seems like in a full-length game this would have been an entire sequence where you grope around through a darkened maze full of enemies, but we got another one of these coming next month, so Holiday just walks off camera and then comes back with it. Its contents remind Ascaya of a story told to him by his grandparents, the story of the bleeding boy. When the first tribe to settle the Black Hills arrived, Hekaitomix took one of their children and disemboweled him at Coffin Rock, and using dark magic made it so he would feel all the pain of this act but never die. It would feed on his After his people attempted to rescue the boy, Hekaitomix eventually killed all members of this tribe save for a shaman named Othegwenda. Holiday suddenly puts together that the teddy bear she found at Coffin Rock was the Mr. Brownie that Mary Brown mentioned, and it was likely her bear that was taken by Kyle Brody, who is currently possessed by the witch, meaning he'll probably attempt to lure her to be sacrificed like Bleeding Boy. We gotta get back.
I don't have time.
Elspeth, you've been sprinting through the forest for days wearing the same outfit. You've been sleeping in it. You stink! You're stinky! Look, I'm your friend, which is why I'm going to tell it to you straight. Everyone thinks you're stinky, okay? You like that? At the schoolhouse, Suzanne lets you know that the newspaper office was burned down last night, and Horace is missing. Rumors abound that he had stumbled on evidence that Cole was not responsible for the judge's murder, and someone wanted it covered up. Also, Mary Brown isn't there because it's the weekend, but she did see her playing with Kyle Brody a few hours ago. She catches up to both of them at the church, praying with Pastor Ascot, and after chasing Kyle down, manages to slap him with the Tawana, and Hekaitomix shoots out of him. He's immediately apologetic and lucid about what he did under the witch's influence, admitting to telling Rustin Parr what to do with his victims. Horace heard Rustin Parr's confession, so both he and the judge were aware that Kyle was the witch's mouthpiece and they needed to be silenced. He points out that Horace's body is stuffed in the church's foundation. Kyle's been made to influence Ascot to carry out both of these murders, the same Pastor Ascot that is currently alone with Mary Brown, the same Mary Brown that Hekaitomix wants to sacrifice in order to increase its magical stranglehold over Burkittsville. Well, it's a good thing he doesn't know we're onto him. And we have time to... After confronting him, he bolts with little Mary hanging on for dear life. Come back here, you! Oh, I'm so much faster than you. Hey, stop. Do I do something? Oh, thank God. Okay, you gotta whack him with the shovel he dropped. Holiday coaxes Mary to admit that she has some kind of paranormal inclination. She can see ghosts and things what normal people ain't likely to see none. She was pretty keenly aware of what was going on here because the spirit of Ellie Kedward told her that she was coming for her. Hekaitomix played off of Ascot's religious faith and used Kyle to convince him that killing these people would somehow defeat the Blair Witch. Mary uses her gifts to tell Holiday a series of hints that could help her survive the ensuing conflict. Listen to the call, remember the warning that came in the night. Sometimes good things are ugly, and find the old woman whose mind was lost in the forest. Being the more obvious of these, Holiday immediately clocks that she's talking about Robin Weaver, the girl that almost met the same fate reserved for Mary. You know, you wonder why Mary left out all these details from her talking head segment. Seems the only memory of this time in her life that's still intact is that at one point a witch with a hairy arm shoved her. Bowers and Suzanne both appear and accuse Holiday of killing the pastor, but before she can defend herself, everyone in the scene turns into a demon and we run into the woods. I like to think she was just so stressed out by this very confusing and awkward social interaction that she just perceived it this way. This is just what it felt like. In the woods, Holiday is suddenly surrounded by a group of disembodied heads and zapped with lightning. Then Robin Weaver appears and leads us to her house, which appears to exist in a space that was not here earlier. I like this character because she's like an old school Deep South witch. She's got bottles hanging from trees to ward off the haints, and she just sits in her rocking chair, divining people's futures and listening to records. Robin gestures to the Civil War uniform she has, and once again alludes to a character we will come to know in the sequel, whom she met as a child in Volume 2's opening. So it actually makes perfect sense why she'd have the outfit she found him in.
My uniform. What happened to it?
I had to burn it. It was caked with dirt and blood.
Huh. She gives Holiday the final Tawana needed to banish Hokkaido Mix for the next 1,000 years. When we step foot back into Burkittsville, Holiday is immediately advanced upon by everyone left in town. But Stranger shows up and fires around in the air. He's got a new layer of their cover story. He says they're both FBI agents. Even after explaining that Ascot was the real killer in town and they've imprisoned the wrong man, Bowers tries to paint Holiday as some kind of maniac that attacked an innocent man. But Kyle Brody's mother shows up to corroborate her story.
What the hell is this? We found it in her room.
That's government property. I'd thank you to place it gently on the ground.
Everyone disperses with mixed feelings about Holiday, some saying she can't be trusted and others saying that she's a hero. There are a handful of great moments that are great entirely for their connection to Nocturne and its characters. As a huge fan of that game, it's just wonderful seeing them again and watching them interact, finding out new quirks about their weird little organization. The reveal that, in anticipation of needing a ruse, Stranger implies he stole a fake badge from a toy store is so charming. A government organization so secretive that they have to pretend to be an at least known secretive government organization. There's a part where Elspeth needs more supplies after mowing down the area's monster population, and there isn't a phone in town, so she has to dictate a telegram using code.
Big flashlight almost dead. Stop. Mild lead poisoning. Stop. No doctor in town. Stop. Send remedy quickly. Stop. Love, Elspeth. Stop.
What scant moments it gets to just be a Nocturne game continue to show just how much potential that idea has. It's just teeming with it, and much like the current generations of game consoles, it's just sitting there, gathering dust with no game.
Hey, brought those remedies you needed.
She drove all the way down here?
Why didn't Spookhouse just send a courier?
Can't have this stuff falling into enemy hands.
Are they?
Well, I'm happy to see you. Come on, it's the last room on the end.
I'll pick it up on something.
You did bring my ECRE pistol, didn't you?
Right here.
Blair Witch woke, I'm down.
Thank you so much for coming.
Walking into the forest together, Stranger says he was compelled to check in on Holiday because he was having recurring dreams that she killed the entire town and then herself. Something she probably would have done earlier when everyone that was being mean to her became monsters, but in that moment she remembered the dream she had with the Damites and thought, no, I should not kill everybody around me. It's almost a clever little payoff to that. It's just confusing that they turned into different monsters, and in the moment she didn't say like, no, not again. I had a dream that this exact sort of thing happened. Holiday gets Stranger up to speed on the change in lore. How there technically isn't a witch, it's an entity like a demon, and all the tales of the Blair Witch were rooted in its exploits. In the middle of this explanation, Stranger disappears, almost as though the earth beneath him gave way. But don't worry, I'm sure he's fine. Oh, thank God. We have one last chat with Esgaia, who theorizes that Robin Weaver knew the realm that Hokkaido Mix could be banished to because she was touched by it, having some kind of imperceptible link between them. The plan is, if I'm following this correctly, to use Rustin Parr's Tawana to enter the dimension with Bleeding Boy, remove him from Coffin Rock, distracting Hokkaido Mix, who will give chase, but then we can use the 1941 Tawana to return to our dimension, where we leave a third Tawana as a triangulated landmine of sorts that will propel it into a void. Stranger returns to keep the demon's spirit goons off us while we run to our trap, which seems to go off without a hitch, or immediate reward. One dead child. We did it. Cut 2, the boy is buried. I like that in the time that Stranger was missing, he was accidentally sent to another dimension where he killed a djinn.
There was a djinn. I killed it, then returned here.
How do you know about djinns?
Who doesn't know about djinns?
It's funny shit. Anyways, that's the end of the game. Oh, after Hokkaido Mix is banished, they find a 4th Tawana that's been set up, perhaps to cancel out the ones they put down? Possibly. They don't really have any way of knowing, and Holiday is ready to go jumping through portals until they find it. But Stranger convinces her to take her win for now.
If it comes back, we'll be here.
Well, he will. Huh. Okay. Hey. You won't hear a peep out of me.
Hey, cheerleaders, I got the new cheer. So fab.
It's a bittersweet feeling because, sure, there are 2 more games in this franchise, and they are both of similar length, feel, and subject matter. But this is also the last time we'll see Stranger, Holiday, Svetlana, and the rest of the Spookhouse Gang ever again for the rest of our lives, probably. Well, definitely mine. With this game's ending comes the true ending to Nocturne. This significantly distracts me from whatever affection I could have reserved for this quaint tale of the Blair Witch, chock full of reverence for Twin Peaks and folk horror. A who's doing it with a paranormal slant. If I try to divorce those feelings and hone in on what works about this game, I'd say it's a competent small-town horror story that didn't exactly need to be part of the Nocturne universe, but I mean, it's a universe just sitting there, so why not? Why make up a new group of paranormal investigators / murderers? It might have made more sense to do this series in reverse order. I guess chronological. Fucking idiot. Because it's a big ask for normies who only know the movies to integrate a Prohibition-era X-Files group with established characters and history of their own into their already flimsy understanding of the story about a spooky witch that snaps twigs and goes ee while you're crying in your tent, only to then never see them again in subsequent video games. You sort of have to start over at the start of each one. 10 minutes into the sequel, I'm having the same guy who would go on to tell me about Ellie Kedward as an old man, telling me about Ellie Kedward as a young man. And then in the 3rd game, you see the thing he was talking about both times. It's just like, it's just a little redundant. There is plenty to nitpick about the plot of all these games and their spotty continuity, but what remains pretty universal is that they all have a joyously grim, gloomy atmosphere. The tale of Rustin Parr is set in a muddy, washed out, and rain-slicked town, anachronistic even for its own time period. Buildings are uneven wooden shacks with old-timey signage, and no way to contact civilization save for a telegram. Everyone's disillusioned, depressed, or frightened, like they've collectively decided to bury the pain of half their school population disappearing in a haunted forest that's sitting all around them, beckoning, hungry for more child souls. Centering the game around a scientist with empathy and complex feelings about the supernatural, its victims, and her own sanity was an interesting change from Nocturne's decision to make its protagonist a curmudgeonly mute with an itchy trigger finger. I really just can't not talk about it, can I? It's just that Blair Witch Volume 1, Rustin Parr, in a lot of ways, displays a fair deal of maturing for terminal reality. It shows an invigorated focus on storytelling and character development. It shows some measure of restraint and patience given the game's shorter than average runtime, and I'll never not wonder what their output would have been like if any of these games were a hit for them. A world where they could comfortably make another one of those. The problem for me in being critical of this game's plot is that I feel like it was made for me. I'm in the target audience and have no problem with it being Frankensteined into another franchise, cut in half and mostly laid out over the course of 1 or 2 info dump cutscenes. I've done my homework. I'm up to speed. This is my favorite class, but I know that's far from everyone's experience with it, and most people haven't even had an experience with it. I'd imagine a not insignificant amount of normie gamers took one look at the box and thought, the wiggly camera snot girl movie? How do you stretch that into a game? No thank you. I would rather die. Katana. I would rather Diablo 2 my brains out.
Just like disturbing because like
jumpy all over the place, and
all I'm saying is, it was a neat little oddity worth looking at if you were so inclined. Like a pinned beetle or a jar full of teeth, worth picking up and giving it a good It's weird, I found myself harboring these positive feelings for the game, yet still disagreeing with how other positive reviews were framed. I came across more than one review from that era that firstly expressed disdain for the film the game was based on, and then followed that up with the 1-2 of, and you know what, this video game does a better job telling a horror story than the film did, which I find sort of reductive. I imagine a lot of the stronger negative reactions to the movie came from its oversaturation, its virality in pop culture, and it finding a great deal of success despite being something any dummy with a camera probably could have made. But they didn't. These dummies did, making them king of the dummies.
The ultra-low-budget film, The Blair Witch Project, has taken in more than $113 million. And that's more than the ultra-high-budget movie, Wild Wild West.
Clay Bride raked in millions, but it is the little movie called The Blair Witch Project that has really got Julia's movie on the run.
I was wondering, did he wet his pants?
Yes, he did.
That's what I thought. We've been hearing a lot of that.
That aside, the impressive thing about The Blair Witch was that it created a myth and perfectly sold it. Sold it so well, it made suckers of a lot of people. It was layered, like there was the mythology, the marketing, and then the movie. So, of course, if you then take that mythology and write a traditional 3-act plot with it, as though it were an X-Files episode, that's gonna have a more familiar appeal. It's like a story cheeseburger. Delicious. But you shouldn't have it all the time. Otherwise you'll die. The Blair Witch Volume 1, Rustin Parr, plays near identically to Nocturne, and both are holdovers from the then rapidly changing survival horror genre of old. Critics at the time really hammered on this point, baffled why the deal breakers from Terminal Reality's previous game were doubled down on. Its fixed camera angles still obscure approaching enemies, and its tank controls make a glorious return, tripping up gamer fingers, inducing nosebleeds and short-term memory loss. Oh, what's that? According to this study, that doesn't happen? Huh. And if someone experiences these symptoms, they should get what? Is that true, Dr. Gamer? Haha, you're a real card, Doc. Hey, do you have any updates on that blood work? Really? Terminal, you say? Wow. Well, you win some, you lose some, right, Doc? No, right, of course, I understand. I'll make arrangements. Thank you.
Who was that?
Oh, Dr. Gamer.
I see. What is he a doctor of?
Gaming.
And what does he usually advise you on?
Matters of gaming.
Makes sense.
What, you got something on your mind?
No.
You sure? You seem to be real curious about my relationship with Dr. Gamer.
It's nothing. Well, I guess I just don't believe you were speaking to a real doctor.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
You think because you can scan for ghosts, you can scan whether or not a guy on the phone I just talked to has a medical license?
Oh, it's not that I don't believe you were speaking to a doctor. I simply believe you feigned talking to any person, certified or not.
What do you think, I just picked up the phone and talked to nobody?
Yeah.
And why would I do that?
I can't know that.
Why not?
I don't.
Why did I do that? However, there are a few ways they attempted to alleviate these initial frustrations, while adding others that may have been intentional to up the game's challenge. Or hey, maybe they just aren't very good at making video games. I should say, from the top, you're unfit for society and should be jailed immediately if you just play any of these games with the default control scheme. A control scheme made by someone that wasn't really thinking about what would be comfortable and accessible for my hands to utilize, but looked at the mouse and keyboard and went real avant-garde with it. So a lot of criticism lobbed at it at the time was directed at the control scheme. But I'm not even factoring that because of fucking course I changed it. Yeah, what are you, an idiot? You're just gonna accept that? Like they gave you some dumb bullshit, but they're like, hey, by the way, you can change this to whatever you want. And you're like, nope, this is the card I was dealt. Fuck you. In trying to return mentally to the year 2000 and reclaim repressed memories about the reaction to this game, I began sifting through old coverage and magazine reviews, and I forgot how much people did not like Nocturne, and how that dislike, paired with the unbearable snark of early 2000s, gave games journalism led to some extra annoying coverage of Blair Witch Volume 1. Like this write-up from Game Informer that doesn't even get the synopsis of the game correct, perhaps in an effort to display how little they gave a shit. You play a young English woman named Doc Sullivan. Doc tries like hell to find Rustin Parr, the Burkittsville baddie. That's not a character, and nobody does that. What Terminal Reality has done here is dump a Blair Witch scenario on top of its Nocturne engine. Dark and clumsy. It doesn't make for the best gaming experience in the world. Because it's dark and clumsy, that describes like most good games. Thankfully, a second games journalist chimes in with their take, which is a bit more forgiving, but also because it's the year 2000 includes, for some reason, every single woman in the game sports double Ds, regardless of age, role, or general attractiveness. And it's wild to me that an organization that produced the printed word and disseminated it to so many would hire someone who appears to believe that someone's age, occupation, or whether or not this guy personally finds them attractive determines their cup size. What was happening in the year 2000? I think we collectively needed some kind of punishment for our sins. Alright. Anyways, you'll still run into the problem of being disoriented after a camera angle change, or the thing that wants to kill you being aggroed off screen, leading you to fire blindly into the forest, unsure where your speeding bullet may wind up. I will say that I can sense that they learned a lesson from Nocturne, and while that can still happen, it happened far less often.
You may find yourself in a situation with poor visibility.
Also, they once again give you the option of using night vision goggles, which swaps you to first person, and takes advantage of the fact that the game is still built with 3D geometry beneath its pre-rendered paint job, something I've only come to really appreciate and marvel at in revisiting both. Other things have these changes that are teetering on being lateral, but mostly improved. It's easier to flip around and run from enemies, and this is encouraged in the game's opening tutorial. They recommend first running to a clearing or an area where you can get your bearings, and then turning around and firing. It's streamlined, more simple, and thus far less funny than Nocturne was. Not once did I find myself swiftly plunging into a hole and splatting to my death. Not once did I become stun-locked by a swarm of enemies that walked forward faster than I could backpedal. It's generally a much easier game, for better or worse, though there is also a difficulty slider that makes enemies more bullet absorbent if you can stomach such artificial modifications. One change I did find kind of amusing and occasionally panic-inducing has to do with weapon-specific enemies. In Nocturne, you had a whole arsenal of different weapons with different ammo types, and some of them were more effective on different enemies, but for the most part, if you pump enough bullets of any make into a monster, they will die eventually. In this game, since Holiday is not a combat-oriented character, her weapon cache is cut down significantly to a pistol, a rifle, and a high-powered light weapon. In Nocturne, they used it to kill vampires. This, she has some kind of spiel about it being changed to do other things.
I'm hoping it also affects ghosts and specters.
It's a ghost gun, as in like a gun for shooting ghosts. But also, some enemies can only be killed with bullets, while others can only be killed with light. And one enemy type can only be killed by putting your weapon away and performing a sort of finishing move. And many times, all three of these enemy types will be attacking you at once, causing you to run, turn, shoot gun, run, turn, shoot light, run, turn, shoot gun, put down gun, kick rock. A decent change of pace from Nocturne's tactic of walk into place firing in two different directions until the floor is red and the Sisyphean battle against the forces of darkness takes a barely registered L. I consider myself an out and proud maze disliker. I find them to often be a cheap means of prolonging creatively incurious games, and the only times they were utilized correctly in pop culture was to keep Jack Torrance from catching up to his murderable family, and to provide dramatic framing for Lucy and Bigfoot form Dracula to fuck. Rustin Parr accomplishes an impressive feat by spending half of its playtime in a maze, yet not driving me to murder my family. While it's easy to get turned around in the forest, it is partially mapped, and over a brief period of time, I found myself able to hit up the 3 important landmarks by memory. Those with a finely tuned gamer intuition can also rely on the old adage that you can find affixed to a highly compressed, wrongly, I'm assuming, attributed meme generator image of Ali G. If you're encountering enemies, it means you're going the right way. So you better hope you don't kill them all without finding the correct path, because then you're kind of fucked. Left to wander in circles over the rapidly decomposing remains of those you've so gleefully slain. I felt genuine dread whenever it was time to head back into the woods, only partly because it was a maze. This series got an eager but false start on episodic gaming, a thing that would become more accepted later, which is novel and creative. The way they sliced a single myth into 3 pieces, handing them off to different studios like an exquisite corpse spanning 3 centuries. It's a wild idea that you're not likely to see replicated. Part of me wishes they were given a bit longer turnaround on these, because there are some ideas here that I adore, but they are mostly one-offs. Quirky gameplay mechanics that are useful in one context and then abandoned. A couple of times you can use Elspeth's recorder to play back snippets of audio that could hide EVP or some other paranormal clue, and it functions like a little trial and error puzzle where you fiddle with different knobs until you can isolate whatever she picked up. There's a lot of potential for a ton of creepy stuff you could do with this, but there's hardly time to make use of it. A wish I had for Nocturne's future was exactly the sort of things they seem to be getting more comfortable with here. There's a focus on the investigative elements, interviewing witnesses, the non-lethal tools of the trade, on researching and understanding something before enacting a genocide on its kind. There's even a whole sequence where you just go to a library and thumb through a bunch of books. It's not a hunt as it would be with Stranger. Holiday doesn't hear about a werewolf problem, show up to the place where they recited, see the werewolf and shoot it. She spends a fair amount of time making educated guesses as to what is plaguing Burkittsville, and at one point considers calling Spookhouse to say that there's nothing conclusive here. There isn't really a moment in Nocturne where Spookhouse operatives find themselves up against a force they don't understand and have no experience with, and integrating that perspective into gameplay was enjoyable. It has to set the linearity of that game structure aside and make the town a little hub with recurring characters that you return to for information and supplies in between trips into the trippy nightmare forest, which makes it doubly odd that they decided to make shooting things even more cool. I could never quite figure out how it triggered, but sometimes you'd score some kind of critical hit on enemies, causing time to slow down momentarily as pieces of monster were sent flying. This would have blown my mind had I seen it in the year it was released.
Shit!
But luckily it wouldn't be long before Terminal Reality released Blood Rain, which I played first, and which also allows you to dismember, I think, the same Daymite character model in slow motion. I like this game, but it's almost a lot better than it is. Seeing how survival horror games have evolved and morphed and eaten themselves into a new, somewhat familiar inverted snake, I can't help but dream of a version where this is utilized better, where the general store does indeed sell ammo and healing items, where you can pick up gossip and hints at the diner, where keeping your secret organization a secret is important, forcing you to tiptoe around the local PD and the FBI, going into the forest and killing a reanimated corpse with arcane symbols etched in their flesh would require some notes to be taken and maybe a call to Spookhouse's cleanup crew. Then again, the one irrefutable thing about this game that I can only defend so much was that it was meant to finger the rapidly splintering dam that was Gathering of developers, and it was made in a matter of months to tie into another game that another group was making that had probably less time to figure their shit out, so the fact that they were able to implement any new mechanics is something of a miracle. I don't believe in many things, but I do hold reverence for that nearly extinct phenomenon, the miracle of a finished game. There was a brief period where the Nocturne engine was sort of cutting edge. introducing wildly cinematic and interesting visuals that had people's ugly gray e-towers just riddled with unremoved stickers describing its contents, turning into smokestacks trying to run. Nocturne was a very graphically demanding game and impressed people with its dynamic lighting and novel cloth physics, both of which see a return in Rustin Parr, but not quite the same. Most people agreed that this game had been better optimized and was much more forgiving on their PCs, but noticed that there were some bells and whistles removed, like lens flares, which is a noticeable omission given how much of the game is spent in intense darkness. Funnily enough, you can simply turn them back on by editing the game's INI file and turning one false to true, but by default they are off. You may be asking, well, if it's so goddamn easy, why didn't you do it for the sake of a concise retrospective? Well, shortly after the game's release, people asked this very thing, seeing as though you could clearly still see it in the promo screenshots, like in this issue of PC Powerplay. Apparently, Terminal Reality's tech support response was to discourage people from turning the lens flare on because it could crash your game, erase your save file, and possibly wipe your BIOS. Now, I have no way of verifying that this exchange ever happened, and the only place these words exist in this order is in a user-submitted trivia section on Moby Games. But even with how flimsy that sounds, I'm not playing with that dark-sided shit. I don't know what arcane trickery and backwoods sorcery is propping this fucker up. I'm gonna trust that in a game already full of bugs, if they said don't, they said it with good reason. I'm sure there's a good reason why whenever Holiday enters a cutscene, she has to circle around to her mark, like a dog trying to find the perfect place to piss.
Ready when you are, Doctor.
Have fun.
Even without them though, this game has more than enough opportunities to play with lighting. Sweeping your flashlight across the janky, mismatched headstones of a cemetery in the midst of a lightning storm still holds a great deal of beauty and charm. Honestly, the whole nightmare sequence in the game's opening, with daymites bursting out of graves and heaving themselves through windows while you're sprinting through the dark, is still really effective and fun. Even during the day, you'll find neat visuals like light peeking through Venetian blinds in the newspaper office and schoolhouse. Also, the way Holiday kicks up a little pile of leaves as she runs through the forest. Her coat moves just as fluidly with her movement as Stranger's did, but it's more stable. It doesn't clip into things and become twisted into itself like some kind of erratic altered world event. A more obvious improvement comes on people's faces. No. Facial animations are improved in Rustin Parr, in that there are some animations now, whereas in Nocturne, characters just kind of pantomimed speech with unflinching frozen expressions. Dialogue is lip-synced at a low frame rate, and characters can blink or make one or two other expressions, and this is so much my shit. I love this era of graphics where photo reference was pasted on crude geometry, making uncanny papier-mâché puppets of people. It's high art to me. We didn't need to move beyond this technology. This was a peak that we've been clamoring to return to ever since, yet only inching further and further away. Disagree with me all you want, but I can see myself in the mirror in this game, and cannot see myself in another game that owes its life to Twin Peaks. So, you know, maybe we reassess that art direction award. There isn't a wide variety of recurring enemies, and their design is mostly kind of boring. I'd say with the exception of the carved up guys. They're a little more unnerving than zombies, because they're just hunched over naked dudes that stumble out of the trees and bolt towards you. Oddly enough, according to the credits, these guys are voiced by Den Johnson, who doesn't have many other acting credits, but he did write the game Ripper? I'm sure that aided his performance as a monster. Deep inside him, he was carrying the pain of that 3D mug puzzle. It probably helps that they are the only enemy that dies in spectacularly gory fashion. There's not a lot of triumph in the act of destroying an animated pile of sticks by knocking over a little pile of rocks. It doesn't have that impact. It's like when you're really frustrated after stubbing your toe on a door and you kind of want to hit the door, but then reason returns to you and you're like, well, it's just a door. I can hardly enact vengeance on an unfeeling object. Plus, I wouldn't get my security deposit back. Voice acting is pretty great.
Gretchen, you make a damn pleasant cup of joe.
You want to watch your mouth, Hale. Ladies are present.
with each character having a unique flavor. Candace Evans returns to voice Elsbeth Holiday, and obviously has a lot more to do, a few more layers to dig into with her character, and she does a fine job. It takes a good actor to make Blast work as an exclamation.
Stranger? Oh, blast it. I hate it when you do that.
I think the general sound design in the game is pretty fantastic, effectively layering ambience and an actual creepy score instead of jarring snippets of public domain horror music. There's plenty of moments that are carried by sound, and Terminal Reality has better figured out how to implement a jump scare, which they don't go overboard with, but more than once display that they are now capable of that. One of the coolest tracks on the disc is a bit of a secret. You can find nickels around Burkittsville that you can use at a jukebox, which triggers a striptease animation from Gretchen. This was of course included as just a nod to the Smelly Boys that they probably didn't disclose with Haxon, but the most interesting thing about it is the song that plays is some kind of trip-hop remix of the lounge song played at the Chicago Speakeasy in Nocturne. It's actually pretty great, but not exactly part of the legit soundtrack. It reminded me of another bit of the Blair Witch Project's peripheral content that was sick, but only had a flimsy association with the material it was branded with. In the late 90s and early 2000s, licensed soundtracks were a selling point for a lot of movies. You used to see band names on movie posters, and even if the movie didn't have a soundtrack full of popular artists, they would proactively release one, billing it as songs from or inspired by the film. These were great if you were a fan of bands like Powerman 5000 or Powerman 5000. There were a lot of great inspired by soundtracks that I consumed, and the one released for the Blair Witch Project, it might be one of my favorites. Aside from one 5-second scene in the movie's opening, there isn't any music in it. I guess you could count when they sing the theme to Gilligan's Island, which they did have to clear the rights for. I always wondered if that was scripted or if they improv'd that, and then in the edit bay the directors heard it and went, "God damn it, there goes another billboard we could have bought." See if we can get this shit cleared. Anyways, this album is meant to be a mixtape CD that Josh's character brought with him for the trip to Burkittsville. And it's especially amusing to me because it's literally just all shit that is exactly what I listened to and continue to listen to. I don't know who's the one that actually arranged this playlist in Josh's place, but whoever did had like the exact same taste in music as me for a second.
What is that strange reflective disc?
What, the CD? It's a CD.
What?
Physical media.
Expand.
Used to be if you wanted, say, the soundtrack to the Blair Witch Project, or the film The Blair Witch Project combined with Curse of the Blair Witch, or Sticks and Stones, an exploration of the Blair Witch legend, you actually received some tangible object that represented it. You, in a true sense, owned it. And nobody, not your mom, not the government, not even a god, could take that away from you.
Weird. So you owned several of these objects?
Oh yeah, you get them for music, film, games, all media.
What did humans do with all of them?
Well, you usually sell them or throw them away, believing them to be obsolete, and then buy them back at quadruple the price years later when you become old enough to desire some anchor linking you to a time when you were young.
And you participate in this cycle willingly.
Baby, that's all I'm doing. Blair Witch Volume 1 Rustin Parr, makes the best of an awkward situation. There's a dozen worse games that could have resulted from this very unnecessary cash grab. Well, attempted cash grab anyway. The saving grace for me is that the game's got character. It's not trying to mirror or evoke the legacy of the film it's borrowing the name of. In fact, it only references it for all of 5 seconds. It's just having fun with someone else's sandbox. It could be paced a little better, it could stand to have a bit more time to cook, but Rustin Parr still makes surprisingly thoughtful use of the lore Haxon created for the Blair Witch, showing how expansive and engaging it was, and could have continued to be were it not for what I'd describe as a series of million-dollar oopsies. Its gameplay is an acquired taste, and resulted in it getting harangued in much the same way that Nocturne was. Maybe doubly so because they kept it mostly unchanged. But I think it's worth the hassle of familiarizing yourself with it. Not just for this game, but because most classic survival horror games, the ones worth playing, used this same scheme or a variation of it. It never quite meets the harmony of action and puzzle work that it aimed for, coming out as a somewhat chatty game punctuated by a decent amount of gunplay. But mixed in, there are a handful of atmospheric, creepy scenes and some decently executed scares. I love the way this game looks and sounds. You could continue to make games with this engine and I'd show up every time. This game also gives a bittersweet send-off to the world of Nocturne because they seemed to be finding their footing as far as survival horror games go. If you look at this franchise like a monster risen from its slab, Nocturne is a big, lumbering, inelegant first step. Shaky, worrisome, but holy shit, this thing is standing on its own. Blair Witch Volume 1 is it righting itself, shifting its weight onto the handrail that was a popular IP. For a moment, this seemed like it was gonna work, but then the handrail wrenches loose from its brackets and the monster slumps to the floor, never to rise again. Well, elements of it would come back in Blood Rain, so yeah, I don't know how that factors into my metaphor. Blood Rain is like the dead monster gets a boner. Thus concludes the video. Thank you for watching it. It's over, so you can go on about your business if you'd like, or you can stick around and hear some plugs and some names read, stuff like that. Or I guess you could be like in a space between being awake and asleep right now, and thus too far away to, stop the video or change to a new one. So I'm gonna take advantage of that and say, Freddy Fazbear, a pocket full of worms, your teeth are falling out, you're drowning, you're having a fucked up dream, you're late, where are your clothes? Anyway, if you liked this video, feel free to engage with it, or if you want, you can check out the description for a series of links that are linking to other ways you could support me, like Patreon. Discord used to be Twitter, but I feel like the vibe there is just kind of, John Travolta gif, except instead of an empty room, it's a room full of Nazis. Thank you for watching the video and for supporting me if you do. And an extra special thanks to Ailing Uncle, 2Password for Kids, Aaron Kwolek, Agendine, Alexander Smith, Alexandra, Anarcho Himbo, Andre Perkins, Aparts 89, Apepex, Bayard Brown, Beef Lightning, Ben Carnell, Ben Oliver, Big Abuela Energy, Black Pluto, Bolt Action Baja Blast, Close Quarter Wombat, Cole, D-Sky, Dante de Glanville, Daphne Pittendry, Dark Raptor 86, Darkside Blues, Deluminati, Der Capitan, The Real Michael King, Devour, Dirt Person, Dr. Beard, Das Days, Dubby, Dwellin' with Darhraku, Edgy, Edward Avila, Fart Mother, Gamma, Garbage Day, Grok, Gunmancer, High Food Court, Lude Alexander, Jack the Dave, Jared Bynum, Jay Alameen, Joseph Zanoni, Just Reshef, Kay Wiley, Carrot, Kafwin Amygdala, Labor Delenda Est, Marcy Bones, Massimar, Michael Schmidt, Borg Detrius, Nekot the Brave, Octo, Ona Hill, Philip Woolley, Rahul Kirthi, Ray Fox, Roland, Saiko Gekido, Salvatore Tosti, Samuel Vanderplatz, Schlongva, Slaurak, Snapplefish, Zoviel Fucht, Zoviel Abaklaba, Vodem Wieden Grasshamentia, Solko, Stephen Kick, Sugarboo, Tech923, Tessuyin, That Iru Guy Loves You, This Deal is Getting Better All the Time, Two Stan, Tyler Collins, Where Am I? Help, Witless Moth, Worm, Zach Bishop, Alfred Correa, Board Loki, Daniel Streb, El Jaguar, Eto, Avanerve, Giraffa. I'm really trying to think of a funny name involving goblins. You'll get there someday. Jeremy Silver, June Choi, Karen Rosenau, Catherine Graven, Klex, Lore, Lord Papula, Mr. Alpacleton, Savvy Fave, Swood, Operator, T-Dog, 8083, 410,757,864,530 gay cops, A Hanging Chad, Albert Hundley, Alex Fisher, Aaron Isaias, Back to Bed, Bang Flang, Binary Vision, Brady, the Sanity Tax Collector, Brozoof Jones, Cantankerous, Chimichanga Jones, Codemite, Daddy Reznor, David Offord, Derforsey, Drunken Badger, Fiona Summers, Fix My Brain, Grounded Valkyrie, James Andrew Perla Adams, James Snipes, Jay Kenny, Jetsun Jempel, Nawang Lapsang, Yeshe Tenzin Gatso, J-Man DX, Larotica, The News Elf, Mad Monty 98, Make It Raynor, Ophelia Fishwife, P. Dizzle, Persian Air. Please stop treating player agency as a negative. Leaning left-right manually isn't a fucking cover system, it's basic movement. Raul Garcia, Robert Brandon, Rowdy Roddy Peeper, Royale with Cheese, Samuel Ward, Sean Hopkins, Sonderbomb, Sorry I'm No Hero, Technica, T. Stoney, 10-Beat, The Angry Pebble, The Condroid. There are other worlds than this. Two legs. 17 turtles in a tracksuit. A big gay rat. A big gay Skaven. ASD 666, Alistair Stewart, Alexander Ulbrich, Alex F, Ali G, Alistair Grout, All the Nope, Andrew Light, Andrew Lubrano, Andy Krieger, Arbiter Numbers, Ashley Hillsman, Astro Shepherd, Atari Steed, Osea, Auspicious Whiskers, Babylon Broken, B Top, Beef, Ben and Cara Dowling, Benjamin Payne, Best Tiger, Bindle, Bishy 93, Biddles 99999999999999999, Bivdub, Bloodworth, Blake, Bohemian Nobody, Bottle of Brannick, Brams, Brandon Frost, Brett Weaver, Buckshot Papaya, Burps Wimbledon, Caleb Zane Kelly, Case, Cerberus Arms, Change Your PFP Already, Colby, Cole Bramlett, Captain Jax, Cult of Lita, Daphne, David Fromke, David Harpstrite, Dazed Clockwork, Danny J.A., Destriga, Divana Upperock, Dirty Space Rat, do taste like Doc Purian, Dog Vomit Slime Mold, Dongs.exe, Dr. Grimbeard's Dino Nuggy Suppository Surprise, Drowkin, Eben Hollub, Eben Sullivan, Ethan Blue, Eudiptes, Every Day, Once a Day, Give Yourself a Putty, Eyeballzilla, 15 gargantuan low poly rats listening to Jungle, Flame 5029 Neo 8, Fried Potato, Frolics with Bunnies, Fuzzy Tingle Times, Game is Good, Game in Watching You, Gamerwood, General Klazara, Ghoul Baby Bond, Goofy Touch Me, Graham Ferguson, Grimby's My Big Baby Boy, Gumpy Wumpy, The Dwarven Fingerer, Haley Bobella, Hey Would You Blow Me, Hentai McToonboob, High Res Titan, Hime Rowan, Hitoshi-san.
Hold on! Aren't those my shoes?
Holy House Profane Void, Horror Show 93, Hug, Huron Lockhart. I am to dwell in the device for all ascensions hence. The merciful aura of Holiday Man permeates every facet of my unworthy soul. I am without meaning. It is Gilgamesh, mightiest of nappers, who Patreons through me. I fart on my hands. I swear I didn't make this just to sub to Grimbeard. I'm a breaking Benjamin. Yes, my dad hates me. INTJ loves her INTP. Irish wristwatch. Irish wristwatch. Irish wristwatch. James Kelly, Jamie Faulkner, Jeff Ladd, Jesse James, Joshua David, Justin Darnell, Captain Ketchup, Carragera, Kieran Walker, Kelly O'Neill, Kevin Hale, Kid Charlemagne, The FCC, Can't Catch Me, Kind Raccoon, Crust Easy, Kurok the Famished One, Lori Kubri, Leland Miliokis, Leopold Gloom, Legendary Dragon, M, Magic Meows, Mandalore Gaming, Mango Roxas, Marquois, Matthew St. J, Max Cohen, Mioang, Micah J. Best, Miles Phillips, Fuck. More Sharks, Mother Destruction, Mr. Ducky Quack, Mystical Lint, Name Requires DLC, Nex 42, Nick Hill, Nick Cooper, Nick Timmons, Nicholas Polestar, No Curly Fries in Hell, Nowhere to Be and All the Time in the World to Get There, Nuclear Sun, Noel Rom, Oliver Marshall, Opichi Kostra, Origami Zergling, Palanquin Noble, Paranoid Vampire, Parapug Deserves a Tiny Dragon Scale Blanket, Pathetically Hopeful, Paul Blart Molgoth, Paul Fierce, Pazuzu, Philip Coffee, Picture, Plebeian Potato, A Tuber of the Masses, Radia, Replicant, Ruibisomem, Rusty Argonian Spade, Scofflaw, the Sussiest Bakadi, Sentient Turtle, Shadanon, Shade, Shaky McCourt, Silatixo, Soy Flowers, Spooky Schaefer, Startide, Stephen Ulibari, Sunshine, Team R, Tegan, the Supervisor, Thick Formom, Trenton Wilkins, Tucker Donovan, Tutant Meanage Needle Teetle, Un petit corbeau dans une sombre vallée, sont mes frères et sœurs. I'm gonna guess Go Crow score meant, the soundtrack to the film The Crow.
Val, I've stolen Grimm's voice to say I love you.
What the fuck happened there? I'm bleeding. Vincent Cronin. Why is the memes timer 2 whole minutes? It hurts. Here's a better question. Why don't people post memes there? Wolf Chalice Logician. Woodji. Zenga PF. Zyanek Benez. Zen. Ziwawe. Zagingu. Zombie Fever. And Zuli, the little blue kobold, for being a patron, and the rest. Hey, thanks again for supporting my channel, and by extension me. I'm in the midst of a power editing sesh right now. I'm trying out a new beverage. It's a Sonic the Hedgehog themed G Fuel. And I gotta say, it's awful. It's like legit doesn't taste good. I've been spoiled by White Monster, but also I've been dabbling in Black Monster. Although I think there are both of these monsters inside everyone. And lately, I've been tapping into the dark side. Yeah, G Fuel should get on that branding. Have a Shadow the Hedgehog one. That'd be fucking sick. I wouldn't drink it because it's probably disgusting. There goes my possible sponsorship. It's fine. This is a Gamer Subs household. What else is new? I got a lot coming down the pipe. Pike? Or pipe? I got a lot coming. Almost done with the script for my 3rd patron-only video. Once again, concerning a paranormal subject matter. It's shaping up to probably be around 2 hours. And whenever I am reaching that point in the production of something like that, I am eternally grateful that I am given the ability to spend so much time doing that. You know, without dying penniless in the street. I'm also working on a 3rd extra secret project that I'm kind of excited about. It'll be a new little format to play with. Hopefully it'll turn into something fun, something snappy, something digestible, something zany, something a little edgy, something a little dark, something a little twisted, something a little macabre, something kind of demented. Yeah, anyway, that would be cool.
Do not let the communists beguile you with their feminine wiles. What you may take to be affection or even love is merely a devious stratagem. It may be hard to resist. Hotsy-totsy, hot diggity dog. This red broad's got a dynamite set of gams on her. Statue of Liberty, Statue of Liberty, Statue of Liberty.